and welcome to day 1 of our Code Class curriculum tutorials. So whether you're a teacher trying to adapt Code Class's curriculum to your classroom, or whether you're a mentor for Code Class and you're trying to learn different days, materials, we're glad that you're here, and we're just going to get started. This is the presentation that we actually use to teach the elementary schoolers, so this is what we show them out on the screen. And this is linked on our website, so this is the main presentation that we use, so feel free to reference it, feel free to use it in your classroom, feel free to use parts, any of that. So the first thing that we like to start with is just welcome to computer programming, and we like to show them the agenda. So part of the agenda on the first day is introducing ourselves. So who are we? Usually we just go across. We usually have about 2 to 5 people who are helping in the class, and so we introduce our names, we say why we're there. And as high school students, we do come from the high school, so we do share our grade. If you're a teacher, obviously you already know your students, so you can feel free to skip that part. Then we usually introduce what is coding, and then we usually have an inspirational video, and then we introduce Khan Academy, and then we learn basic concepts like rectangle, background, or fill, and then there's a mini project, which is build a robot on the first day. So first thing that we start with when teaching coding is we ask them how much they know about coding. So we say, how many of you have heard of coding? If so, how and what? And then we ask, where would you work if you were a coder? So usually they'll say things like, we've heard that you can code on the iPhone, we've heard that these things are coded, that video games are coded, that websites are coded, and they'll say they can work at Facebook or Google since it's on the screen, and different things like that. So usually you have a pretty good response out of them for the most part, and we usually call on about 6 to 7 people for that one just because that's a pretty general thing. And you can kind of gauge how far along in coding people are too by their responses to these questions. So then we ask what is coded in our world, so we ask where you might see coding in your life, and then we tell them what is coded, so all video games, iPhones, movies, animations, robots, apps, and so much more. And usually you get a pretty good response out of this one too. And then we have this video, so it's the future of coding video, and it's a pretty inspirational video in my opinion. It's linked here. I believe on our updated presentation it's linked right into the slide, which is pretty cool. And so you just play it, and then the video will play. And this presentation, it really just talks about how you can start coding, who can be a coder. It's really meant to inspire people to start coding. So I think that's a good place to start. It gets the kids very excited about programming. And the next step is to go to Khan Academy and sign in. So if you just go to khanacademy.com and click login and then continue with Google, and then it will usually ask your age, then you can start. So I'm just going to go to Safari right now. And as you can see, I already have one pulled out, but we're just going to go up to a blank tab, Khan Academy. And so this part kind of takes a little while sometimes because the kids takes a little while for them to log in. But I'm just going to log out of my account so you can see how to sign in with Google. So you're going to go up to the login button, and you're just going to click continue with Google. So usually it's going to ask you something, but unfortunately I am already signed in, so it won't ask me anything, so you're not going to get to see that. But it's pretty self-explanatory. It'll usually ask you to pick an age and a course that you want to sign up for. I usually just pick computer programming, but it really doesn't matter that much. And then you're just going to have them search for a new program, and it will pop right up. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the presentation. So at this point, we usually ask them what different languages they know. So we explain how there are lots of languages in coding, just like there are among different people. So we kind of relate Java compared to like C++ as English related to Spanish. And we talk about how computer languages are how humans communicate with computers. So it's a pretty useful skill. And we already got to a new program. This is a different way to get to a new program. Feel free to look at that. But the easiest way is just for them to look up new program. And then we start teaching the lesson. So the first thing that we teach them is pixels, and this is because this is kind of the basics of all computer programming in specifically Khan Academy, which is the platform that we use. So we tell them that the pixels in Khan Academy, it's 400 pixels wide by 400 pixels tall, and we explain that pixels are almost like units, so like centimeters or inches, most of which they're learning in math right now, so it's kind of a good connection point between computer programming and math, which is kind of cool. and we show them that it's kind of like a graph. So if you want to place things, you place them on the graph. So the x and the y coordinates are how far over and how far down you are in your graph. So the next thing that we show them is creating a background. So the code for background is background with 3 coordinates inside parentheses and then a semicolon at the end. So some of the major things that kids forget to do when they're typing out background is they might forget a G, sometimes they put the parenthesis the wrong way. So in that case, it's better to either have them retype the whole thing or to just fix it for them, or have them retype it after you fix it so that they can learn in that case. So you always want to make sure there's a semicolon at the end, and the X, Y, and the Z are the amounts of red, green, and blue that go into the background. But luckily for us, there is an automatic color picker to help. So a background has to be the first thing in your code just because otherwise it won't print anything on top of that. So then we usually show them an example. So we do background, 1 parenthesis, and then you can kind of pick, let's see if it'll let me pick, some different colors that you want to choose from. And I usually save the program here, and we can save it as day 1 programming. And then we'll save that. Okay. So then the next thing that we usually teach them is rectangle. So we tell them that they need to use the code rect with an X position, a Y position, and then a width and a height. And we tell them that this is going to create a rectangle with a certain position and size based on the variables. So we always like to start out with an example. So we type out rect, and then I usually just do like 100, 100, 20, 20 with 1 semicolon at the end. Make sure they remember the semicolon. And so the 100, 100 shows the place that it goes on the screen. So the 100 is 100 pixels over, and then the second 100 is 100 pixels down. And we usually like to show this by explaining that if you move it to 200, it's going to move it more over, and if you move it to 200, it will move it more down. And the last 2 are just size, so you can change those to make it like 100, 100, and then it will make it bigger or smaller. So that's just rectangle, pretty simple. And now we're going to go back to the presentation, and we will talk about fill. So just as a side note, when you're going back and forth in the presentation like I am, I actually think it's helpful for the kids to see it actually being coded. And as you're coding it, I would encourage the kids to pull up their own presentation or their own program and type it out themselves and try it a couple of things. So after you teach like background or after you teach rectangle, have them try it for 5 to 10 minutes just so that they can get a feel for how to do it and they can play around with it and make it their own. So the last thing that we're going to learn today is adding a fill to your shapes. So the first thing you want to remember is that fill always has to come before the shape you want to color. And fill is really similar to background in that you just type F-I-L-L with 1 parenthesis and a color picker will pop up for you. So if we go to Khan Academy, and what I usually like to show first is fill at the bottom of the program. So you can see it's working, there's a color picker, but nothing's showing up. So then up here, something seems to be frozen, so I'm just going to save this real quick. And then we can refresh the page. Okay, so fill, and then if you fill it up top, you can pick different colors and it will fill. And then what I like to show is if you make another rectangle down here. Oh, it always freezes after I do this. This is on my iPad, so it might be a little different than on a computer. Then if you add a rectangle down here, make it like 100, actually let's make it, 100 is fine. 100, 100, 30, 30. Then you have a rectangle of a different color here. So I would just have them play around with the fill for a little bit, do that kind of thing. And then you want to introduce the mini project. So sometimes there's not enough time for this, usually there is, but the mini project is just to build a robot, so to use rectangles, to use fills, to use backgrounds, and just to make a little robot. We always tell them not to stress because coding should be very fun and to use their knowledge to create a robot however you want. And we do have some requirements listed, but it's really more of an optional requirements type thing. The kids don't always follow it, and that is totally okay. So we tell them to play around with it, and then we usually show them this example. And that's it for day 1. So I hope that you learned something that you can apply to your classroom, or if you want to be a code class mentor, I hope that you learned something that you can bring back to code class. And so I hope you watch day 2, because day 2 we're talking about circles.